What is up, my fellow Chibits? Today, as per usual, I'm here to bring all of you the weekly manga chapter review of Tokyo Ghoul chapter 44. Now, before I dive into the review, I have a couple things I want to say real quick. I want to say I'm very sorry for this review being a little bit later than normal. The reason for that is because I was doing my own, once again, independent research, going in, reading back at the previous part 1 of Tokyo Ghoul, while looking at different things and, like, analyzing the certain panels until I felt like I was satisfied enough to actually also do a review of this chapter. But to be truthful, too, on top of this, I kind of stayed up all night because I was busy with some personal things, and I kind of overslept, and, well, here I am now. So now that I've clarified that, I just want to say all the other reviews that come out today, for instance, you know, my anime and manga reviews I usually do on a Monday, those will be a little bit later today just because of how long this review takes to render. Usually this type of review takes about maybe 3 to 5 hours sometimes, depending on how long it is to render, and that's not even counting upload. So, yeah. So if the other reviews are late today, please forgive me on that. So anyways, okay, so just to go into something, I said something at the end of my last review on chapter 43. I was wanting to dive into the Quinkek's children. For instance, I wanted to dive into them and talk about something that seemed very suspicious after seeing, you know, last week's chapter, or kind of earlier this week, because we had, like, 3 chapters in 1 week, if you think about it. That's kind of crazy. But, anyways, there was something I wanted to talk about. I mentioned this on Twitter, and I mentioned this on Facebook, and I kind of forgot to mention it because I was running out of time, but also, it slipped out of my mind, and I was wanting to make a video on this around, like, Thursday or Friday. I remember I said this. Well, I guess I'm just going to bring this up real quick here, because with this chapter, actually, right at the beginning with the doctor, it kind of gives me a little bit more information that supports this theory in some way. So, before I really start analyzing the panels, this is going to be talking about something that I wanted to mention in the last chapter review. So, as we know, the experiments are done to, like, Psycho, and we get to see, like, you know, Mutsuki, and then, you know, Ure, Shirazu. You know how they're kind of half ghouls, but they're not really ghouls in a certain sense, because they are still able to eat human food. This was something I wanted to actually talk about since we were introduced to RC cells kind of being able to talk in some way, to ROS disease, you know, coming through humans, evolution, different things like that. This is something I wanted to mention because I wanted to go back and look at the surgery of what Psycho and them have went through, because there's something very odd that's starting to really get my interest from their surgery. Because if you think about it like this, in a sense, they're still humans, but they are having ghoul-like features come out of them. Now, as I've already said many times in the previous chapter reviews, ghouls are pretty much confirmed to be evolved humans. But, in a sense, not all humans are at the state where ghouls are. So, necessarily, there's kind of different subspecies of human. And the thing is, though, with the experiments done to, like, Psycho and them, they have a kakuho implanted inside of them, where it allows them to display ghoul-like features where they have, like, you know, like a one black eye, which, it's not really black, it's gray. It's not solid black as a normal ghoul eye would be, or a half ghoul, so there's also some very different characteristics between, you know, these half ghouls from normal half ghouls, but also their RC cell level. And the RC cell levels, once again, kind of popped up in this chapter, which makes me want to bring this up once again. As we know, like Psycho, Mutsuki, you know, Ure, Shirazu, and all them, they have a low RC cell count. I mean, it's higher than a normal human, but it's nowhere near, like, the level of Heisei Sasaki, or Kanagi Kin, or, you know, Sato, that was revealed in this chapter, have, like, a 7,000 RC level. That's fucking ridiculous. Just, we come to find out that the Quinky children, they kind of don't have, like, you know, that high of a RC count, but they are still having a higher than normal. And then it made me start thinking, as we found out 2 chapters ago, humans, in a rarity, 1 out of 1 to 3 million, develop a disease called ROS disease. And the thing is, I'm thinking, like, the reason why this disease forms is because of oversaturation of RC cells. For instance, too many RC cells in the body, and it excretes out of the fucking face or different parts of the body, starts as a pimple and excretes out, kind of like a cognate-like structure. And the thing is like, so if a massive abundance amount of RC cells is inserted into a human, something like ROS might take place. So this is what really started kicking my brain to working and thinking about this. I'm like, oh shit, this is kind of bad in a certain way, because if the Quinket children are actually just humans, but with an implanted Kakuho, but it doesn't have its full capacity as a normal half-ghoul or ghoul, there's gonna obviously be some complications here. Because let's think about this in a biological standpoint, okay? Let's say you have a heart. Well, everybody has a heart, okay? If you don't have a heart, well, what the fuck? How are you living right now? But let's say your heart was put behind some barriers, like a blockage, for a certain sense, okay? Kind of like how the Kakuho is in the Quinket children. For instance, you know how they have barriers in the different layers guarding, like 5 different layers guarding it to where the Kakuho can't be at full capacity. Well, if you have like a blockage in your arteries around your heart, okay? What happens to the human body, or the heart, or your body, if that heart is, so to say, blocked in some way, even slightly blocked? Usually, it's harder for blood to pump, or you might have a heart attack, heart failure. You know, many things will play into that. Let's say you had a blockage in your brain where blood wasn't flowing into your brain. Obviously, that's a serious issue, and you most likely will fucking die. Certain death. So, what happens if you limit an organ's function that is supposed to represent the ability of ghouls' like, evolution to where they can kind of move past ROS in a certain way? What happens if you limit this organ to where it can't do its normal capacities, what it's designed to do, and you limit it to where it won't do those functions it was gifted to humans to do? For instance, what I'm getting at is, the Kakuho, as we know, is a human defense system that was like, kind of a given to humans. For instance, as humans over time, as they experience ROS and RC cells, the human body coped with a way and made a mechanism inside of it, like the Kakuho, to be able to fight against ROS and RC cells and store them in a certain way. And so the Kakuho is that type of organ. It's through like kind of evolution in a certain sense. And if this Kakuho was designed like that through the course of humans turning into ghouls, here's the next thing we need to wonder about. If the Kakuho is actually a good thing, it actually helps out the ghoul not die to oversaturation of RC cells, because the Kakuho stores RC cells and produces some, and allows it to where the ghoul can function. Now, if you block that function off in a normal ghoul, or let's say a said human, Psycho, Mutsuki, Shirazu, Ure, what happens to them? Let me clarify, okay? Right now, I think that their Kakuho is running at like 20%. So let's see, I have the page pulled up here. Okay, so there are a total of 5 frames. And each frame that's removed increases or decreases the potential output of the Kakuho by 20%. For instance, like, if you add more frames, it decreases the output. You remove some frames, well, it increases the output of the Kakuho. And every time you remove a frame, it, you know, kind of makes it to where the Kakuho works a lot better. And so, it removes, like, gives you 20% or removes 20% depending on if you add layers or kind of, you know, remove layers. And the thing is about this, is I was thinking like, so if the Kakuho is not working at full capacity, it's like grabbing a heart and squeezing it where it's not pumping right. So, RC cells are obviously getting into Psycho in them, okay? It's entering their body to where it is kind of affecting them in some way, because they have ghoul-type natural abilities with their strength, to agility, to also sense of smell. And so if you think about it like this, these normal humans are getting an oversaturated abundance of RC cells entering their body. What happens to a human that has a Kakuho implanted in them that's kind of axed off and can't function properly and turn them even to a proper half-ghoul? What happens to that said human body? Obviously, that is not healthy. If they're getting constant amount of RC cells flowing through their body, and their Kakuho isn't able to withstand all that pressure that's flowing within their body. Most likely, the reason why their RC cell count is so low is because of RC cell repressance. And to think about it like that, it makes me wonder what would happen to the Quinket children if they got a little bit more RC cells entered inside of them. Because if their Kakuho is not working right, that might mean that they could possibly get ROS and die. Yeah, that's where I'm going at, because let's look at this in the genetic standpoint, too. Shirazu is up for a very serious issue right now, because his sister, Haru, got ROS. In terms of genetics and diseases and stuff, Usually, depending on your siblings, if they have a certain disease, sometimes you might also be a carrier or have that disease in a certain way because of your parents. So if you think about it like that, Shirazu most likely could develop ROS a lot easier than the normal said human because his sister developed it. Yeah. So think about that right quick. Shirazu is in a very bad situation. I mean, it's not that either. If you think about it, he most likely is going to become either ROS or he might become a Kakuja user because it'll be the exact opposite because of the genetic mutation of the RC cells turning into, like, you know, a Kakuja. That might also be a direction that Shirazu might go because of his genetics. But even past that, let's also look back at previous things that kind of fall into referencing this chapter, this latest chapter, Tokyo Ghoul. In previous chapters of Part 1, if you think about it, the Doctor, he made multiple experiments with the Rize's base, and these experiments turned into felled half-ghouls. We saw the monstrosities the Dr. Kano made. They were monstrous looking. And we come to find out the name he gives these creatures, these abominations. He gives them the name Floppy. Now, the reason for these abominations is because of the failed experiments of trying to use a Rize base for these said humans and turning them into half-ghouls. It was failed. There might be a possibility because of a high RC level count being added to those said humans, they developed ROS in a certain way. Because look at how their functions as human beings were if you remember how they were fighting Kaneki in Part 1. They might have had some slight case of ROS. And it made it into failed half-ghouls. So what if that's also a possible future for the Quinket children in the near future? Okay, so now that I got that out of the way, I think I made that abundantly clear. I think you all kind of understand now. I can move on to the first panel. Sorry about that. I wanted to get that out of the way because that was something I wanted to talk about in the last review and or in a separate video, but I just didn't have time and I just decided to throw it in right here. So anyways, let's begin the actual chapter review. Please forgive me for that. How many minutes have I done talk? Oh my, 12 fucking minutes. Oh shit. Okay, so sorry about that. I am so fucking sorry. Hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. There's a lot more details I can dive in for that, but I think I kind of threw it out there and you kind of understand where I'm getting at with that. If you know what I'm talking about and you can add to that, please do in the comments below, because you know how I love that. It's always fun to recap with you guys with Tokyo Ghoul. So, back on to the chapter. I want to start with, the first page, chapter 44, top panel, and, work through the panels and discuss it. So, the first panel that we see, we continue off where, chapter 43 ended, where Naki was going to go see the Dr. Kano. And that's kind of where the chapter begins off of. You have it to where Naki was called by the Doctor, and the Doctor asked him a very important question. He says this: I want to talk about Gaki and Gugi. And about their deaths, please hear me out. They were ghouls who could not release their Kagane, right? What do you know about that? That right there is very odd. Ghouls not being able to produce a Kagane. So, once again, showcasing that ghouls can have genetic defects. For instance, how Tsukiyama Shuu has genetic defects. He might have a slight case of ROS in a certain way, because of the way his Kagane was going out of control in a way. And the way he was acting, he was going fucking crazy. But we come to find out ghouls can have a blockage in their RC cell pop. Like, let me quote the Doctor. I noticed when I was performing their autopsies, both had an RC cell pipe blockage near their kakuho, causing them to be unable to release their Kagane. But it is certain that the dormant Kagane they possessed were of very high quality. There's that quality word again. Remember in the last chapter with Eto, quality and quantity? If you have high quality RC cells and high quantity RC cells, you will be able to produce a very good Kagane. And once again, that word is mentioned once again in the chapter. Very suspicious, but here's what he goes along the lines of saying even more. Hypothetically, if they were ever turned into Quinky, the data shows that their instant RC factor may be registered around 3,800. Now, yes, that's kind of high, but that is not that high. I mean, that's high, yes, but not that fucking high. Because if you look at someone like Sato that has like a 7,000 RC cell count, G fucking G. So, 3,800 is still impressive for these ghouls, just to get their Kagane. And it goes to show you that they had some really good Kaganes that could be produced if they didn't have this RC cell blockage that was blocking something in their Kakaho. So, which goes, once again, to show you that the Kakaho can have genetic defects, and cause it to where some ghouls can experience issues that might not be the right thing that ghouls normally experience. Maybe there might be genetic defects to where ghouls can't really enjoy RC cells, like consuming maybe human meat in a certain way. I mean, taste deficiencies and stuff like that. I mean, think about it. I mean, if genetic defects can happen to ghouls, which is kind of confirmed here, then that means other things can possibly happen. For instance, you know, evolution with what has happened with Eto when it came to her talking Kagane, and then, you know, how she's a different type of species in a certain way. That's kind of what this kind of confirms. So, moving on, he wants to use these two bodies of, you know, Naki's friends that died. He wants to use them for research. And now, I think we all already know what type of research he wants to use. He already kind of says that he's already dissected them. He's already opened them up and looked at them. Well, he had to open them up regardless to find out that they had an RC cell blockage. But at the very least, the doctor had some form of a decency to tell Naki. I mean, at least he had some decency to say that. But he still doesn't have the best kind of intentions. And it kind of makes me feel bad for Naki in a certain sense. Because Naki, he's not really the most intelligent grape in a bunch of apples. Like, in a sense, he's just not that intelligent. And he's had a lot of, I guess, issues with certain things in the past when it came to his intelligence, to the way he words things, to how he talks. I mean, I remember in part 1 of Tokyo Ghoul, with the raid on the lab, is that Naki had a lot of issues too, and he didn't understand certain things. He was very pure. He's a very pure character in a certain way, the way he accepts people or understands their personality. And in the sense of the way this is given, it goes to show you once again how Naki is as a character. He didn't realize that the doctor was kind of in a certain way manipulating Naki to kind of use his friends' corpses for research in a way. And Naki is unaware of this because he's not really, as I said, intelligent. He doesn't really know much about experimentation. He doesn't know much about what the doctor probably really does in a certain way. And so this right here just flies over Naki's head, and so the doctor can paint a pretty picture in a way to where Naki can agree. So, it goes to show you Naki, it makes you feel bad for him because he probably gets into a lot of situations he doesn't even realize what he's getting into because he doesn't have that good of an education. Now, moving into the page 3 or page 2, depending if you count the color page, you have it to where the doctor, I want to quote him, "I want to analyze the QS surgery using their bodies." Okay, so, you remember how I said the doctor in the last review, he might not be evil? I still don't think he's evil, but the things scientists do sometimes for the research goes over the acceptable limits. And that's kind of what the doctor is doing here. And he wants to analyze the QS surgery using their bodies, and this right here feels like foreshadowing in a certain way that Psycho, Shirazu, Ure, Mutsuki, and all of them, they need to fucking run. Because we already know Psycho has flags on her head when it comes to her disappearing with the fairy tower. Remember, I mentioned this in my review. I think it was chapter 38 or 39. I mentioned how Psycho has this, like, flag or she's going to be abducted or disappear. And the way this chapter is orientated in a way, it was kind of leaning towards the possibility of an abduction or someone disappearing, because there was a lot of themes like that going on throughout this chapter, which I will get into when I get to those pages. But in the way the conversation goes with this right here, the doctor wants to analyze the QS surgery that made Psycho in them, and he wants to kind of use that research to make more owl-type ghouls, for instance, like Sato. And in a way, that means he might grab Psycho or Mutsuki and them, carry them off, and use them for experiments. Because we know the Doctor would do that. And we already know he's been abducting CCG agents. We already know this. It's confirmed. He's been abducting CCG agents constantly to be able to use as like some form of base for his experimentation with these owl ghouls. I mean, he was using Sato, most likely used Almond. I mean, it confirms a lot of things. He's also had a lot of floppies too using this experimentation, but they've been abducting like CCG officials to be able to do this, and leads into other things I want to talk about, how CCG just sweeps things under the rug. But for now, though, this is pretty bad. This is some scary shit right here, because this dude right here is going to probably come after them and probably use them for fucking experiments. And oh god, just imagine Psycho chained up like Rize was in part 1 and having her Kakuho just ripped out constantly. Because think about it like this. It's implied multiple times, it kind of hinted at, that Psycho has the Kakuho from Kaneki-kin. For instance, the Kakuho inside of Psycho is Kaneki's. For instance, Kaneki was harvested, or Sasaki was harvested for his Kakuho to be able to be implanted in Psycho. And it's kind of already implied too, Urei has Arata Kakuho inside of him. So in a way, the best person for Kano to abduct, because he probably doesn't want to hurt his imperfect perfection, his prototype Kaneki-kin, he most likely will go after Psycho. And so he will use Psycho as a new base for Rize. Because we do know Rize's Kakuho and her regenerative abilities are pretty damn high. Like, it's extremely high, and it's, like, kind of unnatural, even in the ghoul world, for the regenerative abilities of Rize. And we do know Kaneki-kin carried this over into his body because of, you know, the Kakuho from Rize, but also that would mean that Psycho also recovers quite fast, too. So, that would mean she could be harvested at an incredible rate. Because we come to find out, actually, that looking at this, Rize's body was harvested 1,200 plus times. Holy shit! Her body was harvested. No wonder Rize looked like shit. Like, no offense, I like Rize as a character, but no wonder she looked like she was in utter hell and shit. She got dissected 1,200 plus times. Oh my fucking god. Dude. That's insane. Like, holy crap. And the success rate of this experiment with Rize was only 0.0025% to make someone like Kaneki. Damn. It's crazy. Oh yeah, I want to point out something really interesting about the panel work that shows the RC cells of, like, the twins, but also Kaneki. If you look closely, it shows you, like, question marks on the back of Kaneki's head, and it doesn't let you know what his RC cell count was, because from what we could see is, Kuro and Shiro, Kuro has 4,110 RC cells, and Shiro has 3,789 RC cell factor. And Kaneki-kin's is kind of question mark, because he never really got tested in a certain way. So I wonder what Kaneki's RC cell count is actually at when he was Centipede. Because if you think about it, Sato is shown to have 7,188 RC cells. That... fuck. He's an SS-rated ghoul. We already know this. He's an SS-rated ghoul. But also, if he has an RC cell count that high, think about what Kaneki-kin, when he was Centipede mode, was at. Like, think about how high his RC cell limit was at. Because, if you think about it like this, Kaneki was fighting Sato, or Sasaki was fighting Sato at like 3,000 something, or 2,000 RC cell factor. And Sato has 7,000 in a certain sense. So, I mean, imagine if Sasaki probably had enough RC cells to really go full Kakuja and all that, how strong he would be. Like, it's kind of crazy. Like, I wanted to bet that Sasaki or Kaneki had about at least a good 7,000, maybe even 8,000 RC cells. And this brings to question, how high is Eto's? How high is her RC factor? Like, think about how high that is. Okay, so, getting on to Tiao, or, Sato and his experiments, or, what Kano's done to Sato, we come to find out that Sato is the only experiment to be successful when it comes to making a owl base. For instance, using Yoshimura's Kakuho to make an owl-type ghoul like Sato. So, yeah, Sato is the only ghoul to kind of be successful, and there's been a bunch of floppies. And the floppies are finally clarified to be failed experiments. And so when we heard a couple chapters back, when we heard a floppy, it can be implied that it's Almond, but also multiple different failed experiments. But yeah, Almond is definitely a floppy, which means that he is probably a disgusting abomination that is probably like some form of failed half-ghoul. Because you remember the abominations in part 1 in the raid lab, like the raid lab arc when they raided the lab? If you think about it like that, those ghouls that kind of looked ugly and they were abominations and stuff, most likely Almond looks similar to that. That's kind of fucked up. That's kind of fucked up. So, Almond most likely doesn't look anything like he used to look at all. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad. That's really, really sad. So, moving on. We also have it to where he talks about how Kaneki tied with Takizawa, Sato. And he said it was pretty impressive because Kaneki is a Rize based, but obviously Yoshimura's Kakuho would be superior because he is kind of like a stronger breed of ghoul in a certain sense. And I like the way the doctor goes along the lines of saying, like, is it because it was a successful based Rize, or was it just Kaneki Kin's own power? I'm not sure. For instance, he's saying, like, what was the reason for Kaneki Kin being able to best Tiao? Was it because it was his own power, or was it because he was a Rize-based ghoul? He doesn't really understand that. But this is what he actually says, which I'm going to quote him. Anyways, as an experiment, he's complete. Imperfect because he's a growing perfection. That right there, I feel like that's going to have a lot of weight in the future. Imperfect because he's a growing perfection. That right there, as I said, I feel like that has a lot of weight to it. That's probably going to be very vital in the future. So, Kaneki is not really perfect, in a sense, but he is perfect because he's constantly growing. He's an imperfect being constantly growing, and it's kind of like he is perfection. Maybe this is implying that there is a way for Kaneki to bridge the gap and become something similar to Eto. Maybe there is a possibility. Maybe the reason why Sasaki Heise's RC cell limit, or RC factor is so low, is because of the RC cell repressants that he's been getting. And maybe CCG in a way are trying to figure out a way to kind of experiment with some form of supplements they give to ghouls for they can be able to lower their RC cell count even lower than normal. Maybe that is a possibility. And what is going on with Sasaki? Maybe he's being used as an experiment to see if they can really control ghouls in a certain way. But yeah, that's the entire doctor part, what we should really pull out of that. So we come to find out the Quinkek's children, they need to fucking run. Just run your ass off, because the doctor is coming for your anus, and he's probably going to kidnap Psycho or Mutsuki, one or the other. Because Mutsuki is similar to Kaneki Kin. There's been a lot of parallels between the two characters, and so Mutsuki being abducted is a high possibility, but also that Psycho will be abducted because she might have the Kakuho from Kaneki Kin, which would mean that she has Rize's regenerative abilities. So it could go either way, but whatever happens, it's going to be living hell. Okay, so the next part we come to find out is that the doctor wants to start using the QS surgery as research. He wants to be able to start using this to be able to use in his next experiments when he makes more TLs for a certain sense. And so this kind of right here is theorizing that, in a way, he wants to kind of grab the Quinkek's children and experiment with them to be able to learn how the QS surgery really works. Or he might try to communicate with the doctor and abduct the doctor. One or the other way is probably this is where it's going to be going to, but the entire conversation after what I just discussed is pretty much the doctor confirming that, hey, we need to go get more information. I want to probably start using the QS surgery for like some form of base to try to figure out how to make more successful experiments, but also I need, to kind of get the Quinkek's children to be able to see how it really is done Now, to quote the doctor again, to reach a big goal, two things are required. One's determination and help from assistants. And I like how he goes along the lines of actually talking about Edison and also Einstein. It's really cool getting to see how we have real figures from everyday life added into Tokyo Ghoul. For instance, Edison, and getting to see Einstein in this chapter. And I like the artwork of that. I actually want to take a few moments to talk about the artwork real quick. The artwork on this panel with Einstein and all that, it's really realistic in a certain way. Because I saw a raw panel, like it was linked to me on my Twitter, Chibi sent me. I saw that there was Einstein photoshopped onto this Einstein that's drawn in this chapter, and it looked very similar to what this looks like. So it's kind of crazy how Ashida added in Einstein into this series in a certain way and how he was referenced, but also how the doctor's saying he's very similar in a certain way. He's like, I have received an excellent assistant. So he's going to be using information from an assistant to be able to further his research, to be able to produce better results in his next experiments using the OWL base. So yeah, the little knowledge right there with Edison and Einstein, it's just great. It's like a little bit of fan service in a certain way if you like that type of stuff. Great fan service for any fan that likes, some work from Edison or Einstein. Now we move into the next part, getting back on the topic of Gaki and Googie. You have it to where the doctor says, hey, Naki, you want me to bring them back to life? And in a sense, I guess you could say the doctor is not really saying a lie. It's like a little white lie in a certain sense. Because, in a way, where the doctor is going with this experimentation, he wants to, most likely, what I am assuming it is about, he wants to probably take out the Kakuho of Gaki and Googie to be able to use their Kakuhos in other CCG agents. For instance, he wants to implant their Kakuho in other CCG, probably to see how the human body would react to a Kagune or a Kakuho that has an RC cell pipe blockage, if you get my point. So I feel like that's where the doctor's going with this. He wants to see how it is displayed in natural humans if they have a Kakuho implanted with some defects. Because as a scientist, this is actually some very vital research. How would a Kakuho that's kind of genetically mutated or failed would actually display effects in a normal human? And that's kind of where this is going. So in a way, he's not really saying that he isn't bringing them back, because in a way he is. He's going to be carrying over their Kakuhos into other people, and depending on how it goes, most likely the humans might display a Kagune, they might be successful experiments, and in a certain spiritual way, Gaki and Googie live on inside of another person. So the doctor's saying that it's not necessarily a lie, but it is. So once again, just going to show you how Naki is easily deceived by other people. It makes me feel very bad for him, because most likely he's deceived quite often by so many people that's a part of Ogiri Tree. And I'm willing to bet, judging by how his personality is, someone like Eto could easily just break someone like Naki and just manipulate him like a fucking puppet, like a fiddle. So, kind of makes me sad. It really does. So, next things to talk about. Let's see. Naki thanks him. He's like, thank you, Pops. Thank you very much, Pops. He's like, Kano, I thought you were just an old fart, but you're a nice guy after all. And what's funny about this dialogue is, the doctor is, in a sense, he is an old fart. I mean, look how old he is. But just to see, once again, how pure Naki is, just kind of pains my heart a little bit. It really does. I mean, Naki's quite a good character, and to see this, of how he's being used like that, makes me sad. So, we get into the next segment I want to talk about now. We have it to where we get into more of the doctor talking about how he might, in a sense, be the assistant instead of the actual person that came up with the real work. Because there's two ways you could pull this from. If he is the assistant, in a way, is because he probably based his work off of someone else, maybe. In a certain way. I highly doubt that Dr. Kano was the first one to come up with a way to make half-ghouls. I don't doubt that. So, in a way, the way him saying, like, maybe I am the assistant, is him just saying, like, there was other people before him that might be also able to make half-ghouls before he was able to do it. Oh yeah, one last thing I want to mention about the doctor, besides just the assistant stuff. He also says how Yoshimura's Kakuho is still recovering, and it made me instantly realize, You remember how Rize was in the state? I mentioned it earlier of how she was in a bad state. She looked like she was in literal hell. It makes me sad because imagine how Yoshimura is right now. Like what state he is currently living in. Being used as an experiment. It's kind of sad. It really is. Most likely he's being used for stuff like that. Well, he is being used. Most likely he is in a very bad shape. Saddening. So, we move into Heisei Sasaki's part next, which Sasaki is trying to hunt down information on Almond. He wants to know more about him, and so he goes to this employee that works a part of CCG. He's like, hey, I want, the employee list, and he pretty much mentions to this employee, like, hey, do you know about Kotaro Almond? And he's like, yeah, he was a special investigator, like, he's a distinguished investigator during the 20th Ward OWL suppression operation, and as we know, he disappeared and all that, and he died in the battlefield. That's according to the information. And this is what it says. Like, he says, what is the reason of his investigator Almond's death? Like, just what happened to him? Now, we, as the reader of Tokyo Ghoul, already know what happened to Almond. I mean, he had a fight with the Eye Patch Ghoul, which is Kaneki Kin. They had a disagreement, they had their differences, they went at it, we saw what happened to Almond, he went down, and as time progressed, we also come to find out, most likely, Almond was abducted by Ogiri Tree, and he might be Floppy, and it was kind of already confirmed that Almond was the one that saved Psycho a couple chapters back, and I find it very funny how CCG is just sweeping this under the rug. They're just sweeping Almond under the rug, because what clarifies this is when he asked for more information about this, like, how he died, they're like, hey, I'm sorry, that's classified. I don't even have the privilege to read that. Why would they classify that information on Almond? For one, I know the obvious reason. They don't want Heisei Sasaki to remember his past, because if he does, he might become a threat, he might go into depression. There's many factors that lay in wait for this. I mean, if he remembers his past, it's going to cause many issues, even his standpoint with CCG and Arima and stuff like that. And in a way, they're kind of sweeping this entire Almond issue under the rug and not letting people even know about how Almond died. But truth be told, too, we've already seen information about the Eye Patch Ghoul already erased in the last chapter. And that obviously is because they don't want Heisei Sasaki to actually see that information. But then this plays into something else that I mentioned at the end of my last review. CCG, as we know, is being manipulated by V, and V doesn't want to build that bridge. They'll burn all the bridges they can just to be able to do what they want. And I noticed there's a repeated pattern going on here. Every time there is a problem with certain things that get out of hand, maybe Almond, or, Sasaki Heisei, or different people, they're swept under the rug, like nothing ever happened. They're just dead, and you don't really know much about the information. And I find that very funny. It's like, if you become a big of an issue, CCG decides, like, just sweep it under the rug, let's not care about it, and just move on. Because it's kind of already confirmed now that CCG knows about floppies. Because a long time ago, when Hinami was talking to Torso, when they were talking in this room before the auction raid, it was right before the auction raid, you have it to where it is revealed that CCG is investigating and looking into floppy. Like, that they already know about it. And so for CCG to already know about floppy, it lets you know that they're not really doing much about it. Like, they're really not. Because if they were, they would probably be having this information out and trying to do something about it. So they're just sweeping floppy under the rug and allowing Almond, someone like Almond, or, different people like Sato, kind of being tortured, or doing their own thing, being turned into ghouls. And that once again shows a repeated pattern of how CCG operates, with kind of hiding things and not really doing nothing about certain issues, especially with someone like Almond, because he caused them so many issues. Now he's like, causing issues with the human world now because he is kind of a ghoul. They kind of just don't care about that, and they just, try to erase it. Now, next part, I kind of fangasmed a little bit. I'm not going to deny that. This next part here, we get to see the personalities, split personalities of Kaneki Kin, or white-haired Kaneki, with Heisei Sasaki. They start communicating. And this dialogue is so good. Like, let me break down the dialogue, because sometimes, the dialogue between these two personalities talking with each other can be a little bit confusing in the order of the speech bubbles. So, this is how the dialogue goes. What are you going to do once you know about the Eye Patch Ghoul? Kotaro Almond. So, this is the little kid, the white-haired Kaneki, talking to Heisei Sasaki. Like, what are you going to do once you know about the Eye Patch Ghoul? For instance, Kaneki Kin. And then also, what are you going to do when you find out about Kotaro Almond? And this is what Heisei says in response. That's for your sake. So Heisei Sasaki is saying, I'm doing this for your sake, my other personality. And then the personality of white-haired Kaneki says, mine? With a question mark. And then he says, to save you. And right under that, because I'm thinking of getting to know you. Instantly when I see a flag like this, I'm like, Sasaki, no, don't. There's already evidence that this personality inside of your mind is not innocent. It's not an innocent personality you want to really get to know. Because, in a way, this personality is very manipulative. Like, it's been manipulating Heisei in a certain way. I mean, we've seen things about this in the past with, Centipede putting his hand on Heisei's shoulder, and also seeing how he was interacting in the last time we saw, white-haired Kaneki. He was talking about, like, how he wants him to disappear in a way, and that was white-haired Kaneki saying that. You get my point. So, it shows you that this personality is not to be trusted, and if Sasaki allows this personality in, there is a very good possibility that Heisei is going to be devoured and disappear. Not emerge in a sense, the dominant personality will take over. And that's where it's going. I've said this many times, there's a lot of evidence to support this claim, and with it continuously going on right now with where this direction is leading with this conversation, around chapter 50-something, 60-something, Heisei's gone. And I'm going to miss him. I'm really going to miss Heisei because there's other little flags in this chapter that kind of link to this happening because there was similar things that happened in the past because of the actions Heisei Sasaki made in this chapter. So, I'll get off the Kaneki stuff real quick. Let's move on into the Tsukiyama Shuu stuff. So, Kanye is still yet to be found. And as we know, it's been about, 2-3 weeks? Maybe one at the, minimum. But there's been about, 2 to 3 weeks that's passed since the fight with Kanye with, the Quinkx children were fighting him. It's been about 2 to 3 weeks since Eto came to him and started manipulating him and offering him an apple. And he's gone for many weeks. This begs the question of, did Kanye die? Is he alive? Did he rebel against Shuu? What happened? Is he being tortured? Many questions have popped up because of the way this is done, and he's nowhere to be found. So, whatever's going on with him right now, it's not good. It's not good. He either betrayed his master Shuu, or he is dead, or he's being tortured. One or the other. Or, yeah, it's kind of sad. It really is. People could say what you will about Kanye. I like his character. I really do like his character. I liked his connection with Shuu, and I've really liked it quite a bit of his progression these past couple chapters. And I know some don't like him because he's a little bit stuck up, but I do like Kanye. He's a cool character. And so to see how he's kind of gone, I don't know how to feel about that yet. I don't think he's probably dead. I don't really think he's dead, but I'm willing to bet he's broken. He's probably broken. So, we have it to where Shuu, he starts talking to Alisa, and he's like, hey, I'm sorry. He's like coming out and saying like, I'm very sorry for what I've done with my actions of, forcing all this drama and stress on top of you, having the one you care about, captured by Kijima and being tortured. I mean, I know this is a hard time for you, and I'm sorry that I caused this. And it's pretty sad to see how this goes, because as we know at the end of the chapter, what happens to Alisa, she... yeah. So, just to see how his family is falling apart, and once again goes to show you what I theorized a long time ago, how Shuu is at a path. He's at a crossroad right now, to where depending on his actions and what he does, will cause it to where his entire family will die. And we're already seeing examples of this, because of the actions at the end of this chapter with what Alisa did, and said to Kijima. Yeah. So, let's move into the next part. So you have it to where Alisa, she sees this information processing on social networks. And I know I'm getting a little bit out of order because this kind of happens at the end, but it pops up here with her looking at a computer, so I'm just going to cover this information right here. Alisa starts looking at a laptop computer, and from what we can gather, she's seeing all sorts of things, like maybe on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, all sorts of social networking sites. She's finding out information about Kijima and where he's at, what district, what location, what time, And because of this, she decides to go find Kijima and capture him, kill him, and get, you know, the person she cares about back. And that's where it's at right here. So, Elise's actions just caused the downfall of the Tsukiyama family. Because the Tsukiyama family right now, this information has kind of been leaked. And it's, yes, it's not Shu's fault, but it also is. Because of his actions of what has happened to him going crazy, wanting Kaneki back, it caused it to where his family had to get a lot of food for him, which in turn caused it to where CCG noticed them and went after them. So, Shuu is kind of the cause of these events of how his family is being noticed as ghouls. So, Shuu meets Sasaki in the park. A continuation from the last meeting in the park, and this scene, I'm just going to go on a limb here and say, a very powerful scene. So give me just a moment, I'm going to drink a cup of coffee, and then I will start talking about this page. Okay, sorry about that, I had to get a drink of coffee, and I had to change my camera batteries, because my camera's actually about to die, so we don't want that. I don't want to be talking to myself for like 30 to 40 minutes, and not even recording anything. That'd kind of rustle my jimmies a little bit. So anyways, back on topic, let's talk about the Shuu and the Sasaki combo. This is really emotional. Like, this entire conversation is so emotional, has so much meaning, and the character development, it's fucking beautiful. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. Just to say, in a way, to see Shuu in this chapter, my respect levels for him rose to an entirely new level, which I didn't think was even possible, because of some of the actions he did. So, as we know, Shu's standpoint, he wants Sasaki Heise to remember his past. He wants him to know who he once was, even though those memories are bad. And that is Shu's angle right now. He has this ego, and he wants Kaneki to remember. And that's where the conversation begins. But here's the funny thing. Soon as they're starting to talk, like right at the start, Sasaki asks, like, are you a ghoul? Like, he just flat out says, like, are you a ghoul? Now, let's look at this in a certain perspective, okay? Sasaki is a ghoul investigator. And as a ghoul investigator, he has to hunt down ghouls. He has to. That's his job description. And so he comes out and flatly says, like, are you a ghoul? To Tsukiyama Shuu. So the first thoughts entering Shu's mind are probably not the most, like, I guess, happiest, in a way. Because if the person you cared about, like Kaneki, was to just outright say, are you a ghoul, in his situation as a ghoul investigator, asking something like that, that would probably ring flags in your mind like he just sold you out, you're about to get killed. Because he is a ghoul investigator. And so to see Shuu in this type of situation where he starts thinking that, it goes to show you once again a little bit of his psyche. Like, he says, a trap? Kaneki? So he thought he was in a trap. That right there, that's sad. It shows you some development also with Shuu, though, to be able to think it's a trap. It's crazy. So, the reason why you have it to where Sasaki asks Shuu this question is because there's been so many crazy things happening around him recently, unnatural things, unnatural encounters, and he doesn't really know what to think anymore, and so that's why he was asking Shuu if he was a ghoul or not. And then he goes along the lines of saying, let me rephrase that. He's like, do you know someone called Uta from the mask shop? Or someone like Hinami and other ghouls I have, probably met as Kaneki kin. He's like, do you know of these people? Like, do you? And then Shuu goes along the lines of asking, like, why? Was there a link between me and them? So he didn't even realize there was a link with some of them, and how Sasaki is starting to key together all these different dots and lines. But also probably subtle memories of Kaneki kin are reappearing in the back of his mind. That's kind of how he's being able to link all these different things. But then you have it to where Sasaki says, I get it. Please don't answer that question yet. And then Shuu goes in his mind and says, Kaneki, is this you as an investigator? Just, what is your goal here? So Shuu really thinks at this moment that it is Sasaki as an investigator, not as, like, Kaneki. Like, a person that would care for him. He thinks he's about to be killed or hunted down. which he's scared at the moment, because the person he admires and cares about, or as a best friend, is about to come after him. So, a desperate situation for Shuu right now. Like, you probably have to admit, he's probably going through a lot of emotions, like 7 stages of hell right now, because of having to deal with his friend probably turning against him. But we know Sasaki's not, but that's the point, though. Like, that's what he's probably thinking. So he says, let me ask once again, are you someone who knew Kaneki? Shuu gives him a look. And then he thinks, like, what should I do in this situation? And then Kaneki says this, I've come here individually as Heisei Sasaki. Not first-class investigator Sasaki. So he's come here as himself. He hasn't come here as an investigator. So that implies that I'm not here to come after you and kill you if you are in fact a ghoul. I'm not here to do that. I'm just here to get information. And that's all he's here for. So in a way, this is already starting to show you the psychological change of Heisei Sasaki. How he is starting to change and how the other personality is affecting him. And changing how he looks at the world in a certain way. So this is already showing key signs that Heisei Sasaki is going to disappear if this path continues on down. Now, I've avoided learning about myself all this time, but I think I have to face him now. I think I should know. So he thinks he should face his past self, Kaneki Kin. He says it might be helpful. I don't think it's good that he disappears from inside my head. And this is when Shuu finally realizes how Sasaki is different from Kaneki. This one panel, what I'm about to say. When he says, like, I don't want him to disappear from inside my head. So this implies that he's saying, like, he has a different voice in his head. And then Shuu realizes, but you are. And going along with that, with what he was probably going to do to complete that sentence, he's probably going to say, you are Kaneki Kin. Why are you saying this? I mean, you are him. You just have amnesia. Why are you saying that you don't want this dude to disappear from inside your mind when you are, in fact, that person? So this is when Shuu finally realizes the difference between Heisei and Kaneki. He realizes they're two separate entities. And then he thinks in his mind, and he remembers what Toka said, the past you're trying to learn about might be much crueler than you can imagine. Like, for instance, you know what Toka said to Shuu is starting to affect his thoughts, where he's realizing kind of why Toka was thinking like she did towards Sasaki, why she didn't want him to remember. And this is starting to show signs in Shu's character and his mindset of how he's looking at Sasaki after witnessing what he just did. Now, this is what Shuu says. No matter what changes, even if you have to abandon your previous life, would you mind at all? You see to where Heisei Sasaki cries. And he says no. This finally shows something that we have all probably did not realize Heisei Sasaki had. And this foreshadows something very bad happening in the future. Let's rephrase what this means, okay? Heisei Sasaki, he wants to find out about Kaneki Kin. He wants to know more. But he does not want to give up anything for that information. For instance, and to go on the limb here and say this, he wants his life like this to go on forever. For instance, with kind of his family. Saiko, Shirazu, Mutsuki, and Urei. They're his family, and he wants this to continue going on for a very long time. He doesn't want this to end. And then in his mind, he realizes that eventually this is going to have to end. It's going to have to end. It's fate. It's going to happen. And he says, I have no other option to remember. But the thing is, he doesn't want to give up anything. He wants to remember, but he doesn't want to give up anything. So this implies the weakness Kaneki Kin had since the very beginning. Kaneki's main weakness that drove him and changed him as a person, what caused him to turn into white-haired Kaneki, was his weakness to not be able to choose. This was a really obvious weakness that was a part of black-haired Kaneki's character in the past. And Shuu is starting to realize that Heisei Sasaki is very similar in a way to the original Kaneki. For instance, He has the weakness to where he doesn't want to give anything up. Let's retrace our steps and to realize what this weakness really implies. If you remember in the past, with Kaneki-kin's mother, his mother died thanks to the actions of how his mother was. For instance, his mother didn't want to give up anything. She didn't want to give up her sister, wanted to help her sister, but also didn't want to give up on Kaneki. She couldn't choose anything with her lifestyle or what she wanted to live with, and it caused her to kind of die and succumb to death. And in a way, it was because of her weakness not being able to choose. And so she died because of this. And in a way, this is exactly what happened to Kaneki-kin. He couldn't choose, and so he had to deny a certain part of himself, and a part of him died. And that's how white-haired Kaneki came about. So, thinking about it like that, this is leading into a section to where Heisei Sasaki, he's going to be forced to make a decision. Whether or not he likes it or not. Like, it's going to happen. He's going to have to make a decision to lose something. Even if he doesn't want to make a decision, it's going to happen. So, if previous events of Tokyo Ghoul tell us anything, when we have a crossroad to where a character has to choose, and they don't choose, that usually means a lot of negative repercussions for said character. That's what happened to Kaneki-kin. Look at what happened in the chair scene when he got tortured and turned to white-haired Kaneki, and then eventually became Centipede. It's because he wasn't able to choose. So with this, that means Heisei Sasaki is probably going to be forced to choose something. Either choose his life as a CCG agent, or choose his life as a goal of once being Kaneki-kin. But even then, that means the death of himself. Let me explain. What has happened to all the characters in the past that wasn't able to really choose? In a way, the mother of Kaneki-kin died because she wasn't able to choose. And in a sense, Kaneki died in a mental way, like his inner mentality died because he wasn't able to choose. So what is going to happen this time if the patterns repeat? Heisei Sasaki's personality will die, and Kaneki-kin will live on. And even if Kaneki-kin resurfaces, it's not going to be the same Kaneki. It won't. It will not be the same Kaneki. I highly doubt the same Kaneki will ever be back again. Only fragments. I don't think the Kaneki we once knew, even white-haired, will ever be back. I don't. But yeah, the decision that's pulling up right here is if something isn't done and Kaneki or Sasaki doesn't make a decision, he's going to be forced to make one, and some bad things are going to happen. Enough said on that. Now, the next part I want to mention before I continue with this, Tsukiyama Shuu stuff, Hori, she is running around. She says it's about time. And she's been doing something for the past couple of chapters, but we don't really know much about what's going on. And thinking about it like this, you can see in this one quick panel with Chi, which it's very quick, and so you don't really know much about what is going on here. And we do know Chi is the entire reason why Tsukiyama Shuu has been reawakening and why Heisei Sasaki is now returning in a certain way and trying to once again become Kaneki. It's because of Chi setting all these events up. And thinking about it like this, Chi meets someone, you can see Chi see someone at the end part of this panel. And what if this person that Chi is meeting is Eto? Because there is some form of mystery surrounding Chi and Hori. What if she's meeting Eto in a way to supply information or different things? I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there. I mean, think about it. What if she's doing that? So, now I've said that, let's move on and continue the Shuu stuff. So, we have a flashback, and this flashback, I think, broke all of us. If you're a Tsukiyama fan, or if you loved the time to when white-haired Kaneki was around, this scene most likely would devastate you. It devastated me. I choked up when I was reading this part, because seeing Shuu thinking about the past, this one page right here, with Shuu just sitting down and talking and all that, he says, I really enjoyed those days. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my. The development that means for Shuu is unreal. This is Shuu finally admitting that he thinks of Kaneki as a friend, not as food. Okay, people still say that Tsukiyama Shuu still thinks of Sasaki or Kaneki as food, as gourmet food, but that is thrown off the table with this chapter. It goes to show you now, which it was already obvious that Tsukiyama cared for Kaneki quite a bit. I mean, he went crazy and he was depressed because of that. But with this words and Shuu accepting it, him mentioning it and realizing the development goes leap and bounds past we already knowing, because he realizes and accepts this. He doesn't think of Kaneki as food. He thinks of him as a friend, a best friend. So sad. And then you see him look back at Banjo and them, and I'm like, he thinks of them as friends too, and I'm like, oh my god, dude, just look at me. It's so sad, man. It's so sad. Just seeing that, like, Shuu. And then this is when the true change in Tsukiyama Shuu takes place with his development. Sasaki Heise says, "Where are you going?" Because Shuu turns around. He's like, "I'm sorry. I no longer know the words I should be telling you." And so what this means is Shuu is moving over into the Toka camp. For instance, he's starting to realize that him learning about his past might not be the best thing. He's putting Kaneki-kin's happiness over his happiness. That's sad. That's really... I have a tear right here. It's fucking sad, dude. He's putting Heise Sasaki's happiness over his own happiness. Willingly, and just walks off. He doesn't even know what he wants to say. Beautiful, 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 beautiful development. Way to go, Ashita-sensei. That is how you do a character. Okay, so this one will be really quick. We come to find out that, after the information of Heise's mask operation, they got a lot of information. They come to find out that Ogiri Tree and Rosewald's, connection isn't really that much. And so, you have it to where they're able to move on with their investigation. Don't have to worry about the entirety of Ogiri Tree. Getting into the final part of this review, you have it to where Kijima meets Alisa. And Alisa, as we know, she was the earlier part in this chapter. She was looking at social networks, trying to find Kijima, and she goes to meet him. And if you're desperate and you care about someone, you'll go to leaps and bounds for said person. I mean, look what Shuu is doing. Look what Shuu is doing for Kaneki. It just goes to show you right there. So Alisa doing this, it makes a lot of sense. If you care about someone and they're being tortured and you're seeing stuff like this, obviously you'll go to many lengths to try to save said person. And so what Alisa's doing is human in a certain sense. Even though she's Ghoul, which we know Ghouls are human, it's just a very human reaction. And Kijima baited this said person because of that. And he says, like, I've been baiting you this entire time because I wanted to get more information. You're very loose-lipped and all that. I got a lot of information out of you, and you told me so much about the Tsukiyama family. He's like, I think I'm a little worried about that. And because of that, he's like, at this rate, you're going to get axed from that failure of a Tsukiyama family. What this dialogue goes to show you is Alisa told Kijima everything. She told him everything. She just outright said everything she possibly could, trying to save the person she cares about, for Kijima could spare said person. But as we found out, Kijima already executed the person after the video, and Alisa just died in vain. So, yeah. Kijima, brutal. Very brutal. Like, Motto status right there. That's Motto status, or even worse than Motto in a way. But he outright just kills Alisa, and he's probably going to be delivering her head and corpse to Shuu to let him see the failures of his actions and what he's caused, which might lead Shuu into even more spiral of depression. And Kijima also has the information on the Tsukiyama family now, so Tsukiyama family's kind of screwed. They need to run. Like, they really need to run. Like, it's done. So, if something's not said and done very soon, like by next chapter, Tsukiyama family needs to go into hiding, because that is how bad it is right now, because Kijima is coming. He's got his information. And, yeah, that's the end of the chapter. So, chapter 44 of Tokyo Ghoul Re. It was a good chapter. Very good chapter. Very, very good chapter. I think this review is a lot longer than I envisioned it to be, honestly. I gotta edit a lot of... There's a lot of edits in this video. Oh, my God. So, once again, I wanted to go on a note to say I'm very sorry for the review being very long. And also, please forgive me for that. Some of you enjoy it. Some of you, I don't know how to feel about that. And please forgive me for the other reviews of today being very late because of me making this review. Please forgive me for that. And yeah, tell me your thoughts and comments below. If you have any theories, if you want to discuss anything, let me know in the comments below. You have a wonderful day or not, wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.